There are way too many things that are broken in sales. One of these is sales hiring, which is probably in a huge crisis due to all the technology advancements, the changes, but also the layoffs, which are impacting also the way sales managers judge new new interviewers. And a few months ago, I think, when I was talking with myself about this topic, I just ended up on Tony Pearson profile, who just wrote a post about it. And this is why I dropped Tony a message to dive deep into this topic and ask a few more questions on sales hiring, why it's broken, how it's broken, and how to fix it. So happy to have you on the show, Tony.
Real pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for asking me.
So, Tony, just for the benefit of all the listeners, a few words on you, your experience, what you've done, what you're doing, because I think that you have more than 30 years of experience to consolidate in a message. So feel free to go.
Yeah, not quite 30 years, not quite that old, although my grey hair makes me look it. So in a nutshell, spent 20 years or just over 20 years building and leading elite sales teams in quite challenging environments across BI and SaaS companies, not market leaders, companies vying to become market leaders. So a real lens and focus on excellence, real magnifying glass on the people. Good was never good enough. The guys had to become excellent. Everyone in my team had to become excellent. So over that sort of 20-year period, I hired a lot and developed a lot of people. And it's put me in a very good position to do what I do now, which is I work with sales leaders all over the world with my sales transformation consultancy called Lead Proactive. And I help sales leaders have more impact on their teams. I provide them the tools, the guidance, and the know-how to get greater results from their teams, focusing on the sales leadership level.
Thank you so much. And just let's go straight to the point. Let's introduce the reason why I reached out. So I read one of your posts, and anyway, for the audience, just follow Tony. He will remind you at the end of the episode how and where to follow him. But I just read one of your posts on sales hiring, okay? And I remember me scrolling through my LinkedIn feed, no sense, and reading sales hiring is broken, and the sales interview might just be the biggest lie in business. You're not hiring a CV or even a polished interview-ready candidate who is ready to say all the right things. Now, what shocked me was like the first sentence, that the sales interview might just be the biggest lie in business. And it's a bold statement. It's even a strong statement. So question is, why do you think it's broken? And sorry for the double-sided question, but why do you think we still put so much trust in interviews as they are today, even if they only tell, I don't know, probably 20% of the story?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I like that you're asking it. I think that there's one thing to sort of premise here, which is for me, if you're a sales manager or a sales leader, your number one skill, the number one requirement for you is to become an expert hirer. That's the number one skill you have to get really, really good at. It's also a bit like everything else in sales management and leadership, something you get zero help with. Very few sales leaders I work with have ever had any coaching or training on how to recruit, what to spot, how to interview, what a good interview process even looks like. So you've got that kind of starting point for many sales leaders, which is just having a go, and they fall back on what is the known way, which is just, well, I guess I have to meet some people and decide, and hence the interview becomes that tool of choice. So that's kind of one really important thing to take into consideration. So a lot of sales leaders are going into those situations without really understanding even what they're looking for in the first place. They're looking for a feeling. They're looking to feel like this person has something, has the right energy, but really it's gut. It's all gut feel. And that gut feel is made off the back of this very polished candidate in front of you who is giving their absolute best. And it's a bit of a false situation because really what you're going to get into if you're a if you're in sales and in that tough environment when you're trying to build a business, you're going to get into situations that are difficult, and that's the bit you're trying to uncover, not the side of the person when they're at their very best, when they're all prepared, when they can answer all the questions they're used to being asked. So that's kind of where I was coming from with that post. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And it also, links to my next question. Because you just talked about how a person and how a new salesperson has to react in front of, a challenging situation or in a challenging environment. And in fact, in the past, you say you're hiring how someone thinks, reacts, and behaves when it's hard, when the chips are down and when the pressure is on. Why do you think it's so hard to detect these skills in a traditional interview setting? And I don't know, are we asking the wrong questions? Are we not equipped? Or maybe like we just don't take them into consideration?
Yeah, it's another really good question. And for me, it sort of links to what I said in a moment ago, which is the first thing is most sales leaders who haven't been taught how to hire and how to recruit expertly are not necessarily even sure that that's what they're looking for in the first place. In fact, most don't really know what they're looking for. If you ask a sales leader to define the characteristics, the traits, the competencies of their ideal candidate, you normally get a pause and they start thinking and they start saying words, then correcting themselves. In other words, it's probably the first time they're thinking about it. They want to get good people, but what do good people look like? So the first thing is, what am I even looking for? What traits and characteristics am I looking for? If they've thought about that, which is brilliant, the next thing is to make sure that the number one thing they're focusing on initially is attitude, drive, resilience, grit. That, not necessarily skills, but mindset, because again, that's what you're going to fall back on in tough times, and you're going to hit tough times.
Absolutely. But this leads me to another question, Tony. Because in your experience, experience as a leader, as a consultant, when you're hiring someone, especially for these high pressures roles, like how do you really look for these traits? Is there a checklist? Is there a series of steps? Is there a specific step in the hiring process where you kind of stress test these kind of competencies or skills? Because in my experience, it's all about interview with the HR, interview with the second HR, maybe dumb panel, maybe an even dumber panel with people who are there to, I don't know, create a kind of committee decision that most of the time doesn't make any sense. How do you look for these traits which are the practical ones?
Yeah, that's spot on, and you make a really good point there. If you're a sales manager, you have to lead the hiring. That cannot be HR, even if that means upsetting some people. That you've got to make sure that sits with you because you live and die by your people. So yeah, that's a really good point. So there's a few ways to do it. First of all, is to know that that's what you're searching for. That is what you're looking for, and that is the first interview should be all about that individual, not about their experiences in terms of work, not about how good they are at closing. None of that matters. What you're looking for that first hour, typically hour-long meeting to be, is all about that individual. What makes them tick? What ambitions do they have? What have they done in their life that they're super proud of? What was hard about that? And what did they do to overcome those hurdles? And then you start to develop an idea of resilience and grit, and if this person has faced adversity or not. And that's that first interview gives you that opportunity to do that. But again, most hiring managers will go straight into the CV, their selling experience, and all this rubbish, which is just the interviewee is ready for those questions. They're not used to talking about themselves.
So you basically flip the interview script. So due to that, sales is a people to people or person-to-person job, I have to look for these traits. So rather than benchmarking my interview against what's written, I will benchmark the next steps against what I see and what I look for, which seems simple, but trust me, Tony, I'm doing a lot of interviews in these months, and no one does that. Now, let's go to the sales manager, because you say that you want to look for traits which are related to the salesperson personality. What kind of characteristics do you think the sales manager must have to be able to look for this? Don't get me wrong, I'll be straight to the point. I think that most sales managers don't even have the right empathy to lead these conversations. So what do you think the sales manager must have to be able to look for these traits?
Yeah. What the sales manager needs to have is a firm understanding of the attitudinal side of what works in their business. How much adversity are they going to be up against? How difficult is the role? When does it get hard, and what sort of reaction does he look for or she look for in that situation? So a firm understanding of their reality and what is tough in their sales role, and then to try to define that into some traits and competencies that you can start to benchmark your interviewees against. So I encourage my clients to build an ideal candidate profile and list out the traits they're looking for, create questions that uncover those traits, and score them. It's very subjective, but it's a great way of benchmarking one candidate against the other. So yeah, it's really that understanding and a roadmap to be able to uncover those key traits through the right questions, which is something I help my clients to build. The other side of this is there are tools that exist. There is science out there that exists to help you cheat, basically. And that's something which I only discovered a year and a half ago, and something which I'm bringing to my clients now, which is an absolute game changer. And so there's sales DNA assessments which can uncover a lot of this for you at the screening phase from Objective Management Group. They're amazing, brilliantly predictive. And that, in combination with building your ICP and your blueprint of questions, that gives the sales manager a massive advantage and sort of loaded dice in their favor.
Objective Management Group, just a shout out to Dave Curlin, who's been a guest on this show. So hi Dave. Still, I'm still waiting every Friday his rant of the week post. And no, but that's pretty it's really informative. Sales DNA, meaning let's go back to the basics, because it seems to me that we are in most of our hiring efforts, we are forgetting the human to human piece in sales. And now there is a lot of noise which is leading us to go back to the past. Now, you mentioned a lot of traits, that build up this sales DNA. I have a question for you. Which are the more, the most overlooked, which are the most misunderstood, which are those who get ignored but always show up later in a performance that might be a dashboard or anything else related to the way we evaluate sales performance?
I mean, the ones that get missed out and show up later, they're rarely skill related, but most sales interviews go down the skill track. How good you are closing and all this rubbish, and it doesn't tell you anything. The traits that get misrepresented at interview stage, and this is why it's a gamble, and this is why I use those tools and other ways to just try and load the dice in my favor, is the level of desire and will, which is absolutely vital. Anyone will say they're driven in a sales interview. Can they demonstrate it? What have they done so far to show that they're backing that up? So that will always show up pretty quickly. So you have to get super good at spotting true drive, true grit, true resilience. But some of the more subtle things that come up are things like a need to be liked or a need to be loved by prospects, which you might not spot at interview stage. And in fact, it's holding a lot of sellers and leaders back. probably as we speak, and that will manifest itself in a way where perhaps they're not asking the tougher questions. You end up with bloated pipelines, poorly qualified deals that never really close, and that can often be traced back to I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to ask that tough question. And that is actually a mindset that that usually is hidden until you start to see those things. But that can be 6 months, 12 months down the line. So if you can pick that up at interview stage, you've got an advantage.
Got it. And thanks for the answer. Now, let's go a little bit back to the hiring process, okay? So now you defined the reason why it's broken. You also gave us, and thank you for that, a kind of path to solve it, and also to flip the script. But now the question I have is, why do you think it's broken? Like, why do you think companies are still like structuring it in a way that allows us to lie?
Yeah, it's a really strange phenomenon, because most bits of business that you see not working particularly well get some attention and get fixed. Hiring seems to have been left behind on that front. It's like it's okay that 1 in 7 new hires works out. That's okay, or 1 in 2 if you're really good. But that means half the time you're hiring people that are either in the wrong role, you're getting it wrong, they're getting it wrong. It's madness. So it's a great question. I think it seems to have been accepted by a large number of companies that we will get it wrong as often as we get it right, and there's nothing we can do about that. Which again, like I said, is madness. And what I'm trying to do is help raise that there is a better way. There is a path to finding the right people, because not every hire you make that doesn't work out means they're a bad hire. They're the wrong fit for that role, right? They'll be great somewhere else. So there is a pathway, but there needs to be a bit of recognition that it is something we need to fix first. And I don't know why, but that seems to be missing in a lot of businesses. It's accepted.
I think that because too many people committed or, put their signature or name under this kind of structure, so they have personal interest in keep it in. Because I think it's easy, it's like when you hire a third-party consultant just to offload the risk of a bad decision. And that's the same with the hiring process. You just sign up for the process, and then it's a people problem. It's not your company problem. So you start believing your own things. Now, another question, which might be probably the longest answer, because that is a lot to uncover, but what's something you believe about hiring in sales that more people need or must hear, but not everyone is ready to accept and put in practice?
Well, there are a few. The first thing is that, and I'll go back to my first point, if you're a hiring manager, your number one skill set should be recruitment and nailing that. That has to be the thing you perfect. But most people don't really look at it. They just do it and have a go and get it right sometimes, get it wrong sometimes. But that is a fact. If you're building and scaling teams, that needs to be your focus, and you need to get good at that. Gut feel alone is never enough. 10 to 50% strike rates are not good, but they are normal. And that is because gut feel is really what is leading to decisions. Another interesting one is that hiring from market leaders is a terrible idea. It's the worst idea ever. Yeah, if you're building and scaling a company that isn't a market leader, don't go to your competitor and take their best people, because they've got all the advantages. Their context of success is different to what you can bring. So that is a crazy another crazy tactic I see. So there's a few there. The period of time between hiring someone and them joining, that is a critical piece of time, which you need to know how to handle that so that people don't pull out of joining. That's something that happens all the time. and there's no fix to that. There should be. I mean, my clients don't worry about that, but that's what happens in real life. And the onboarding process is also part of the interview process, and so that piece needs to be absolutely amazing. So there's a few things there to be.
And thanks for the answer, because this answer leads me to other two questions. Hope you don't mind. The first one is about the onboarding or even training for the sales manager. The second one is for the market leaders, okay? Hiring from the market leaders. Regarding the first one, do you think that a company, if they want to promote or hire a sales manager, should dedicate, 30 days or the first 30 days to this skill development plan by which a sales manager develops these traits to be able to hire the right candidates? Or is it something that companies should expect from a manager and the manager can develop on his own? Because what I see is that they hire a sales manager, they expect that he knows how to detect the right people in a culture that is totally different, or even in a role that is totally different if he has been promoted from an IC role. So what is your take on that? Who's responsible for these skills, for these traits?
Yeah, spot on. And you're right. There is just an expectation that somehow through magic, if you promote an IC to become a sales manager, that they should just be great at all this stuff. And it just doesn't work like that. In fact, if you're taking an A player who's brilliant at selling and putting them in a management role, they're a rookie in that role. They are a rookie. And so the best companies that I see out there are, they have almost a conveyor belt of talent coming through their business who they see as future leaders, and they're teaching them these skills. Now, stuff I do with businesses all the time is future leaders, 6 months, 12 months out, start teaching them how to do this stuff so that when they step in role, they don't have the experience, but they have the know-how, they have the skill, they know what to do next. That, for me, sits with the CEOs or the development teams there, the enablement teams, but managers don't get much enablement, right? It's all about sellers. There is no manager enablement. That's why I do what I do. It's not magic. It needs to be learned. Therefore, it needs to be taught. Someone has to do that.
Got it. And I'm also happy that there are a lot of, ways to develop these skills even outside of your company. Like, for example, if someone looks at your sales DNA, your posts, your website, and so on, at least you can gain a perspective. At least you can start reading a few books or understanding how to detect the right traits. It's only a matter of, I want to do that, I will do that. Thanks for the answer. And the second question, Tony, is about market leaders. And I have a lot of things to ask about this. You mentioned at the beginning that you have been, successful leader in a few, let's say, tough industries or segments, like SaaS, for example. So all these kind of segments where only the first three get some money and all the others die. Like it's in the words of Nassim Taleb, not even mine. Now, hiring from market leaders is always a so-so experience, because you're hiring from a market leader who probably, as you said, had all the kind of comfort to succeed, and probably, a product-led sales motion which led him to only apply the well-known methodologies that can stick and work only for major players. Talking about market leaders, how can you, as a person who's hiring, as a sales manager, detect if this person you want to hire from a market leader has the right amount of grit, attitude, or will it be victim of, a poor structure in another organization? How do you detect this? Because probably most of them just want a more entrepreneurial experience, but the vast majority is not suited for that. So how do we understand if they're good or not for a certain role if they step out of a market leader?
Yeah. I think it comes down to the questioning level. but I'm always looking for examples of what someone has done. So if you're a market leader, I might say, look, just tell me about the sale you've made that you're most proud of. Tell me about it. What was your role in that? What was difficult? What was the challenge? And what did you do to overcome that? And I'm looking for people who take ownership and have made stuff happen. The answers I don't really want to hear are, oh, I brought my boss in who closed the deal. That's not going to happen at this company. That's not us. So I know that there's not that level of experience that perhaps I'd need if I'm not in a market leading company. So I'd definitely be asking for examples. I'd do all the things I said earlier on about finding out about the individual first, about the adversity they've been up against, how they've handled tough situations. I'd also find out what drew them to that company in the first place. What was it about that business and that opportunity? What was the reality, and what's now drawing you towards us? And somewhere in that conversation, you will start to uncover some interesting truth.
That's interesting. And especially you touched an important point here, which is the CEO, CX something who closes a deal on the salesperson's behalf. And I think it's important because this is part of most of the sales methodologies out there. So sales methodologies tell you, okay, build your network and then leverage your C something and bring it in. But in not so major players, if C levels are brought in, most of the time technical C levels, they can even ruin the deal. So that's a really important point. And now I go back to methodologies because sales methodologies are an important part. I'm pretty much trained in all of them. And it doesn't mean that I can apply all of them. It means just that I was a decent student. But my question for you is there any specific weight or importance you give to sales methodologies or kind of certifications when you're hiring someone and in the way they can apply, or is it something that you don't take too much into consideration? Because if someone has been trained on, I don't know, I name names easily, on force management, has done anything on force management, brilliant methodology, but I've seen that person worked for, I don't know, MongoDB, Deal, Gong, might be that methodology only sticks because of that product-led sales motion. So what's your take on this?
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. So I'm if someone has studied a sales methodology and applied it and can show me how, I'm interested in that, not because of which sales methodology it was, but because this person is open to learning, can apply, and probably wants to learn more, right? They're probably quite coachable. So I'm interested from that point of view. I'm not bothered which sales methodology it is, to be brutally honest. And the reason for that is I don't see a one size fits all with sales methodologies that means any of them are important enough. For me, it's about the detail of where you are in that moment and what you're trying to accomplish. So you might steal a couple of bits from Spin, use a couple of the pieces from Medic that are really important. It's not. So I'm less interested in the name, but I am interested in someone who has learned and applied, because that shows me what that person has as a learner.
Thank you, Tony. And I think that we almost running out of time. I just have one question. I have a preview about the answer, but I just want to know, what you're working on, what kind of interesting projects you're working on with your own company, maybe a new book you're completing, where people can find you, and even what they can buy from you, like as simple as that. Because someone might be interested in this answer and say, oh, I want to look into the sales DNA now. I have a problem. So feel free to take all the time you need.
Cool. Yeah, sure. So, I mean, look, my focus at the moment, so my business is Lead Proactive. So you can find me at leadproactive.com. All my focus right now is on my clients and helping deliver great outcomes for my clients. So, like I said earlier, supporting sales leaders to help them have a better plan, better impact on their people, drive results, hire smarter, develop teams faster. And I do that through bringing science and know-how to the table. And so that really is my focal point at the moment. So if you're interested in improving your sales leaders and driving results by weaponizing your sales leaders to make them brilliant, then that's something I can help you with. If you're also interested in evaluating your teams and evaluating your new hires using the tools that we've mentioned, then that's something I can help you with. But right now, my sole focus really is on that. I do have a couple of books which I'm sort of a third of the way through, and I will finish one at some point, I promise. So I'll keep you posted on that. But yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, Tony Pearson, or find my website, leadproactive.com. I'd love to hear from you.